There's a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from spending years apologizing for your own tears. And the worst part isn't the tears. The worst part is the story you tell yourself in the 3 seconds after. Here I go again. What is wrong with me? But before we talk about the shame, it's worth asking something more basic. What is crying, actually? Because the biology is genuinely strange. Humans are the only species on the planet that shed emotional tears. Not just tears from irritants or pain, but tears in response to meaning. No other animal does this. Which means when you cry at a movie, or during an argument, or just because something beautiful happened, you're doing something that is, as far as we know, uniquely human. Researchers have found that people who cry easily tend to have a more reactive amygdala, the part of your brain that processes emotional weight of things. It fires faster and hotter. It's not that you're less in control, it's that your brain is registering more signal per stimulus, more meaning extracted from the same moment everyone else just walked past. And for a lot of people who cry easily, the shame started early. A parent said, "Stop being so dramatic." A coach told you to toughen up. A classroom that laughed watching you cry over something. And over time, through enough of those moments, you didn't just learn that crying was inconvenient, you learned something about yourself. That you were too much. That the way you experienced things, that depth, that immediacy, was a defect. Something to be corrected. And so you tried to correct it, you held your breath, you pushed your tongue hard or bit the inside of your cheek. You learned to spot the warning signs early and build a wall fast enough to stop it. You got very good at redirecting conversations away from anything that might crack the surface. You laughed things off. You stayed quiet in situations where you actually had a lot to say, because saying it might mean feeling it, and feeling it might mean losing it in front of people whose opinion of you still matters more than it probably should. That's a person who got the message over and over that their natural way of being in the world was a liability and spent years adapting around it. That's an identity that got quietly rebuilt to accommodate a world that wasn't comfortable with someone's inner self. There's a concept in psychology called sensory processing sensitivity. About 15 to 20% of people have it. Highly sensitive people process information more deeply, notice subtlety others miss, feel the emotional texture of situations more completely. The researcher Elaine Aron, who spent decades studying this, found that highly sensitive people aren't just more emotional, they're more perceptive, more emotionally intelligent. They have higher accuracy in reading social situations, better threat detection, stronger intuition, a kind of built-in pattern recognition that runs faster and quieter than most people's. The cost is that the same system that notices everything beautiful also notices everything painful. Same sensitivity, no filters. But the real thing is that it's a biological trait to cherish, not a character weakness to be embarrassed by. The system that makes you tear up at a stranger's kindness is the same system that makes you unusually good at knowing when something is off, or when someone needs help, or when the thing someone just said doesn't match what they actually mean. While this societal pushback happens to everyone, I want to name something directly for men, because it's a slightly different experience. The conditioning runs much deeper and starts much earlier, not as occasional feedback, but as a fundamental instruction about what a man is allowed to be. And so for men who cry easily, it's not just social embarrassment, it's identity conflict. It touches the core of how they were taught to understand themselves as men. Don't cry, be strong, toughen up. And the suppression can be so total, so ingrained, that some men genuinely don't know anymore if they're emotionally strong or emotionally numb. which is wild to sit with. The possibility that what felt like strength was actually a long-term shutdown. But the truth about feelings is they don't disappear, they compact, and they come out sideways, in anger, in distance, in a low-grade numbness that you eventually stop questioning. If that lands somewhere uncomfortable, good, let it sit there. There's a version of this conversation that stops at crying is a strength, and that leaves you with a warm feeling, but no useful ground under your feet. And that's fine as far as it goes, but it doesn't go far enough. People who cry easily often live in a slightly different register of experience, and almost nobody around them seems to be in the same place. Other people move through things faster. They don't get stuck on the moment. They don't carry the weight of a conversation 3 days later. They don't feel the particular ache of a song the way you do, at the volume you do. And after a while, especially if you've been told that the way you experience things is too much, you start to wonder if something is fundamentally off about you. Not just that you cry, but that you feel the way you feel, that you notice what you notice, that you care the way you care. The isolation of being emotionally different isn't in your head. It's the gap between how you process the world and how most of the people around you seem to. And that gap doesn't disappear just because someone on the internet tells you sensitivity is a strength. Knowing it's a strength doesn't automatically undo the years of believing it was a flaw. That's not how internalized shame works. There's a difference between knowing a fact about yourself and having language for your own experience. People who cry easily often know on some level that it doesn't make them weak. They've been told that. They've told themselves that. But almost nobody talks about the specific texture of what it actually feels like to be them. The recognition of the shame spiral, the name for those suppression attempts, the held breath, the bitten cheek, the tongue pressed hard to the roof of your mouth. No one talks about is how much of your energy goes into constantly translating your high-definition world into a low-resolution view just because it's easier to share. The real relief doesn't come from someone telling you your sensitivity is a secret superpower. The relief comes the moment you decide to stop translating, to let the moment be exactly as heavy or as loud or as painful as it actually is to you, and to finally stop apologizing for the space it takes up. So crying easily was never the thing to fix. What needed fixing was the idea that you were flawed for feeling as much as you do, and that idea didn't come from inside you. It came from people who didn't know how to be around depth and called it your problem instead of theirs. And you believed them, probably because you were young when they first said it, and they kept saying it, and nobody offered a different story. Until now. This is that story. This world doesn't need you to stop crying. It needs you to stop apologizing for it. If you think there are other people who need to hear this, the like button is how you help YouTube find them. And if you want to keep going deeper on the psychology of how we internalize the stories we're given about ourselves and what it actually takes to rewrite them, subscribe, because that's the space this channel lives on.